Finally, the long-awaited Ethiopian sixth national election has been concluded. Voters have casted their ballots peacefully and freely. The National Electoral Board of Ethiopia is expected to announce results very soon. In the meantime, the vote has taken place in a big turnout and in an astonishing discipline. The voting public has shown determination and commitment towards democratic transition by casting their votes. Waiting until midnight under the influence of a burning sun and heavy rain, Ethiopians have also sent signals with their ballots to foreign forces meddling in Ethiopia's internal affairs. As this is a big rainy season in Ethiopia, the country is also expected to undertake the second round filling of its Grand Dam over the Nile. Hello viewers, you're watching Prime Log on Prime Media. I have a guest today. Mr. Lawrence Freeman is with me in our studio in Addis Ababa.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Welcome.
Glad to be back.
So you are here to observe the ongoing electoral process.
Correct.
But unfortunately, you couldn't make it because of a flight schedule or a problem on your flight. What happened?
Our refueling and reloading in Lome, Togo, apparently we got hit with a very severe thunderstorm, and what I was told is it had caused mechanical damage to our plane. So we had to spend the night in Lome and then take an Ethiopian airline flight back. So I didn't arrive until Monday night. I intended to arrive Sunday night. But such is international travel.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
sorry
okay.
for that. So, but I guess you met people.
Yes.
You had a couple of conversations with
Yes.
relevant people, and you might have attended the press conferences
Yes.
of observers.
Yes.
So overall, how is your assessment of the electoral process, and how is the mood here?
I think that with all the indications we have so far, and it's still not even 2 days after the election, the indications are that the Ethiopian people came out with a determined view that they were going to peacefully, calmly vote for unity, peace, and prosperity. And I think they have fooled a lot of critics who in the West said this would not be successful, there would be violence, there would be chaos. None of that occurred.
Yeah.
And I think the Ethiopian people should be very proud of themselves for the way they conduct themselves. And I think the West should be ashamed of themselves for the way they predicted things before the election that have never occurred. And yet they made these predictions and they were proven absolutely wrong. So congratulations to the Ethiopian people.
Oh yeah, we have to say congratulations to the Ethiopian public voters who turn out in that big,
Yes.
mass, line up while the rain is heavy, into the midnight.
Yes,
It's,
polls stayed open many hours later.
I think it also came to me as a surprise. I didn't expect this.
Yes.
I could expect some problems to occur, but fortunately,
Yes.
it went well, and that was amazing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised. I attended yesterday a press conference by the Eastern Africa Standby Force, and they had 28 observers in 8 different parts of the country. Now, so they weren't everywhere, but they did cover 8 regions. And they were emphatic in their concluding official statement and in questions and answers to me. This was a peaceful, calm, free election. There was no intimidation by the Ethiopian government. There was no harassment, and there was no violence, and there was no chaos. All the predictions from the Western governments and media never happened.
Never happened.
And now we have indications from preliminary statements from President Obasanjo, who is heading up the African Union delegation. They will have a press conference today, but in early indications from President Obasanjo, I believe he's also giving a thumbs up, as we say, to the Ethiopian election. So now the ball's in the court of what the Western countries are going to do who very few of them even had observers here. Yeah. But the Ethiopian people have spoken, and at least so far, all indications are a fair and free election. And we'll see what more we find out.
It is, yeah. Maybe coming to the next question for you. If, this electoral process went successful to the end, how do you think it helps Ethiopia move forward?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you have the Eastern African Standby Force, if you have the African Union, then you have pretty much confirmation from Africa. Now, the West has to make up its mind what it wants to do, but in a certain point, in a certain sense, it doesn't matter because the Ethiopian people have conducted an election and it's supported by their African brothers and sisters. Now, this gives the Ethiopian people and the government, I think it gives them a little breathing space to move on to more aggressive, bold policies for the development of the country. I mean, up to this point, internationally, two issues, in addition to what's going on in Tigray, there's been the issue of the West preemptively saying the election might be illegitimate, and then, of course, the West also being involved in the question of the filling of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. As you indicated, now the election appears to be on the right path and concluded. The dam appears to be being filled by nature.
I will come to the dam issue, and just to add on that.
Right.
Do you think this electoral process, if concluded peacefully as it is started right now, will help Ethiopia, withstand with, external pressure, and also solve some of its internal problems right now?
It should, because once we move past the electoral process, of course, there's going to be a second election in September. Yeah. So we have to also wait and see the results of that. Then I guess there'll be an election in Tigray probably sometime next year. But now that we're moving through the election process, this gives Ethiopia the opportunity now to move forward. And I would suggest there's two things. One is, I believe that there's going to be some economic initiatives to build up even the domestic economy of Ethiopia. And two, now Ethiopia will have to do something that is necessary for its existence, which is it has to have a dialogue on the question of ethnicity. And I hope that Prime Minister Abiy will lead this discussion and that there will be inclusive participation, because you cannot have ethnic groups saying that they are separate and their identity lies in their ethnicity. The identity of Ethiopians lies in Ethiopia. Yeah. And all people, Ethiopians, no matter where you're born, and in fact, no matter where you're born around the world, every human being is created equally the same with the creative power of reason, of thinking. And that's what makes us unique and different from the animals. And that is what defines us as human beings. And we're grouped in nation states so that the nation can continue the continuous development of its people. Ethnic cultures are important, but they cannot overrule the actual combined interest of the entire state. And therefore, I think the dialogue is going to have to be on the difference and dominance of Ethiopian citizenship over Ethiopian nationalism. Now, this is going to be a very contentious discussion, and it's going to go on for a number of years, but it has to happen.
Maybe to add on that, some people say this election will only be, will only prove the Ethiopian sovereignty and give legitimacy to government. The government that's going to be formed after this election. But in its own, they say, cannot solve age-old Ethiopian problems, as well as its deep-rooted socio-economic problems. In his short conversation with media, the Prime Minister, while he was in Bashasha, where he voted, he said, he was heard saying, like comparing the casting of vote with the planting of seedlings. Mm-hmm. And that his government is envisioning a democratic and greener Ethiopia.
Yes.
How plausible is democratic and greener Ethiopia under the leadership of Abiy Ahmed, in your opinion, Mr. Freeman?
Well, I what attracted me to the policies of the Prime Minister was not only his efforts to resolve the conflict with Eritrea, but the formation of the Prosperity Party. Here you have a non-ethnic based party, which for me was very important because all the other parties were always dominated by what ethnic group they came from, what geographical region. And of course, this represents a flaw in the 1995 Ethiopian constitution, which will have to be changed in this process. He says, no, we're going to have a party that's open to everybody and not based on ethnicity. That itself is revolutionary for Ethiopia. And that process, I think, has reached a new level with the election. If the Prosperity Party, as in votes are coming in, indicates will be the ruling party, then that gives them, the government, the chance now to move into a discussion on these other sensitive, contentious areas. But he's already proven this is where he wants to go, and I think it's the right direction. You cannot have a country ruled by ethnicity. It doesn't work. It didn't work in Nigeria. It doesn't work in Kenya. It doesn't work anywhere. You have to have a higher concept of the nation that has to be inclusive, but not ruled by which group you come from.
Yeah. Actually, his concept of, his vision of making Ethiopia greener is widening its scope, that he is sending seedlings to neighboring countries.
Yes.
And now he's aiming for the Horn of Africa region and East Africa, the broader African vision.
Yes.
In his recent talks in Jima last time, while he was addressing the public, he said Africa is waiting. So he's looking for Africa and the rest of the continent, parts of the continent, particularly this region where we belong.
Yes.
And also in his aim to democratize this country.
Yes.
He said this election is a witness, and that is, the election is by far better than the previous elections we had.
Yes.
Do you share that?
Well, I think that's true. I think most people, if you listen to the interviews of people who have voted and the stories that are coming out, everybody is saying, yes, this was different. It was freer. There were problems, but there's problems in every election. There's problems in our elections in the United States. But I think it was a positive step forward. And I share the Prime Minister's belief that Ethiopia can play and will play a very important role for the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia's economic policies are more bold. The setting up of the first electrified railroad in sub-Saharan Africa from Addis Ababa to Djibouti, the establishment of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. These are very powerful, bold initiatives that the Ethiopians take, even from a standpoint of an emerging nation. And I think that if we get past this election without any additional problems, Ethiopia will be in a better position to continue to provide leadership to the Horn of Africa. Yeah. That's my hope.
Maybe coming to the next, it's rainy season, as you well know, here in Ethiopia, and Ethiopians are eagerly waiting the filling of the dam.
Yes.
The second filling of the dam,
yes.
And the government of Ethiopia's unwavering commitment and firm stand on GERD has brought the issue to this level where it seems the filling of the dam is no more negotiable. Again, if Ethiopia succeeds in filling out the dam for the second time, do you think that will also help the country to curtail some of the pressures coming from outside?
Yes.
And also fix some of its internal problems again?
Yes. I think, from my standpoint, if you look at the election and now you look at the filling of the dam, these are two critical political nodal points that, once they're accomplished, puts Ethiopia in a much stronger position. Last year, I think the Ethiopian filled about 3.9 or 4 billion cubic meters of water. And actually, it was because of heavy rains, nobody knew that the Nile stopped. There was no decrease in the flow of the water. Now, I think this filling will be 13.9 billion cubic meters. And again, if there's a heavy rain, no one's going to realize there's a problem. I think that this issue, in part, was motivated by some misguided thinking by the Egyptians.
Perceptions.
I think, which is poorly thought out on their part. I think the Sudanese government, which I've worked with many years ago, has been somewhat brought in or corralled into taking an anti-Ethiopian position, even though the Sudanese gain everything.
Blackmailed, as you said last time.
Yeah, because they gain. They're in a win-win situation. They win a regulated Nile, so that eliminates flooding, improves their agriculture, and they're also going to get energy. Now think about 6,000 plus megawatts being distributed in the Horn of Africa, which includes Sudan, includes Kenya. Africa desperately needs energy. Desperately. I mean, energy and rail systems, the lack of them is holding Africa back. The lack of energy kills people in Africa. Unfortunately, the West doesn't understand this. So any attempt to increase the electrical power in Africa should be supported. And there is no reason not to support Ethiopia. Ethiopia is going to work out the filling rates. This is a technical question, and it depends on the rainfall. No one can predict what the rainfall is every year. But there is no inherent objective problem that Egypt and Sudan should be bothering and attacking Ethiopia. I know they brought this to the Arab League. Of course, the Arab League has nothing to do with it, sub-Saharan Africa. And now I believe there's an attempt, I read, to bring it before the United Nations Security Council, to get the UN 15 members to bring themselves, get involved in the issue of the GERD. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the UN National Security will take this up. The UN Security Council will take this up. I think the AU is still going to be the overriding mediating body. Of course, not much progress has been made. My hope is
America is also supporting that cause.
Well, America's supporting, but what the Egyptians want is they want America, the United States, and Europe to come in directly into the negotiating process. What the United States position is up to this point, I haven't been there in a few days, is to support the African Union's mediation. Now, the Egyptians want more than that, but it is
in couple of statements from State Department in this month of June.
Yes.
They have said it clearly. They support the African Union mediation, and they want these three countries to come to an agreement.
Right.
By this, what they mean, I don't know.
It means that there's not, that statement, which I read, means that the United States is going to allow the AU to direct the process. The Egyptians want the Americans to come in directly. But so far, the United States has not made that step. And if the United States keeps its distance and allows the AU to continue to be the governing mediating body,
the Egyptians want binding agreement.
The Egyptians want the Ethiopians to guarantee so much water each year will reach the Aswan Dam, regardless of what the rainfall is. So they're demanding an allocation of the Nile water, which is not what the dam is about, because to the credit of the Ethiopians, none of this water is going to be used.
Probably that's what Americans are supporting. The Egyptian cause is to reach at that binding agreement where the flow of water is regulated to serve their interest anyway.
The problem you have is the United States and many countries in the world are contaminated by a disease called geopolitics. And geopolitics says everything in the world is a fixed sum, and nothing changes. So either you're on top or you're on bottom. The United States is depending on Egypt to deal with its relations with the Palestinians and Hamas, and Sudan as well, in recognizing Israel. So they're not, the Sudan and Egypt are being brought in to the geopolitics of the United States, which is the wrong way of looking, because my standpoint is that the universe is organized for growth and development, and man has a role to play in helping that process. So instead of figuring out how we control a fixed amount, we should be thinking about how we continue and develop larger amounts which benefit everybody, such as the electricity coming from the GERD is a benefit of growth to Africa, and it will benefit Egypt too. In fact, the foreign minister, Shoki, has said that the filling of the dam will not deprive Egypt of water, and actually gives Egypt a water bank to draw on in areas when in seasons of extreme drought, there will be equivalent 74 billion cubic meters of water, which is almost the Nile, will be available to help out Egypt in a drought period. But they're being so dominated by geopolitics that they're not thinking straight on this question.
Coming to the external pressure, the campaign against Ethiopia, Americans have sanctioned Ethiopian authorities and visa sanctions.
Yes.
And I heard you say America's sanction, it's a lie.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, I am not a big supporter of sanctions. I think only in the rarest of cases can sanctions be even used because they're very harmful to the population. But here in the United States, you have one of the most egregious actions of foreign policy yet by a president and his administration, because Ethiopia has been a long-standing ally. We've worked with Ethiopia on containing al-Shabaab. We've worked with Ethiopia on providing security to all parts of Africa. It goes past Democrat and Republican. It's a bipartisan relationship. And under Secretary of State Blinken and under President Joe Biden, but it's really been led by the Secretary of State, we have now issued sanctions, which are usually reserved for enemies, and we have now issued them against an ally. So there's nothing that could be stupider than what the United States has done. And in hearings in the Congress recently, over the last few weeks, they have not ruled out potentially more sanctions. Now, how far they'll go is unclear. You have a number of people in the Biden administration who are followers of the Clinton people and Obama administration who have become very antagonistic to Ethiopia. Linda Thomas Greenfield is the ambassador to the United Nations, has come out against Ethiopia. Samantha Powers, who is one of the, if not the, prime motivator of destruction of Libya, which was almost 10 years ago, which hundreds of thousands of Africans have suffered from that act of stupidity in the Obama administration. You have Susan Rice in there, you have others. And these people do not understand the importance of what Ethiopia is doing in its development policy and are trying to impose, in fact, the Biden administration is trying to impose a dictatorship of democracy on the rest of the world. We will set the standards for democracy and human rights, and if you don't agree to it, you will suffer the consequences.
What do you think Ethiopian authorities should do about these ladies you've mentioned?
I think the Ethiopians have to think about, right now, again, if the AU gives a support to the elections today, which we'll find out in a few hours, then I think Ethiopia is on very safe ground to continue to improve its domestic policy and its policy with its neighbors in the Horn of Africa and all of sub-Saharan Africa. Have polite relations with the United States, but there's no reason for Ethiopia to be worried about pleasing the United States. That's not going to happen. I mean, that's not what the Ethiopians should be concerned about. How do you provide for a increased standard of living and for 110 million Ethiopians and 1.5 billion Africans? That's the primary question, not pleasing the United States and pleasing the ladies of Biden's administration.
So, just in connection with that, so where do you see the next move of USA in relation to the current and past diplomatic ties with Ethiopia? It's a century old, even more than a century.
Yes.
Since Ethiopia and the US started these diplomatic ties, and it's one of successful diplomatic ties in Africa. And now the US has sanctioned Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I never thought about that personally. Right. And now it happened anyway. It happened, and you are even saying another round of sanction might come.
Well,
so where do you see the relation of these countries going?
Yeah.
In the near future?
In there was a Senate hearing from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and the Biden administration has not confirmed a new Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. So you have an acting one, Ambassador Gudik, and he said at the hearing that the Biden administration has not ruled out future sanctions. The U.S. is in a serious bind right now because, again, with the East African Standby Force saying the election was peaceful and calm and fair, if that is echoed by the African Union today, I think they're having a press conference at 2 o'clock, the United States will be in a very serious bind. Does the United States, under President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken, go against the interest of Africans, or does the United States recognize that this process is valid, is fair, and pull back from what it's done? That's going to be a very interesting question because there's a lot of people in the Congress, in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, who I know them and I watch their hearings. They're very ignorant. They know very little about Ethiopia. They are dominated by the propaganda that comes out from CNN and other news outlets that Ethiopia has to be punished, that there's ethnic cleansing going on, which there's no proof of, that there's genocide going on in Tigray, which there's no proof of, that Ethiopia is using food as a weapon, there is no proof of. These congressmen and senators are very easily manipulated because they're relatively ignorant about Africa and in particular Ethiopia. However, will the United States step forward and come out against African institutions like the East African Standby Force and the African Union? That's going to be an interesting question because if they do that, they're going to make themselves less relevant to Africa and they're going to have less leverage in Africa. Now, what they should do is they should end the sanctions. They should reverse the $100+ million, more than that they've removed from aid for, not aid, but money for security and money for development. The U.S. has maintained its aid and is actually the biggest contributor outside Ethiopia and Tigray. But the problem is they've sanctioned certain officials and they've cut back on money for security and development. They should reverse that. And in fact, if we had any wisdom in the United States, which I'm not so sure we always have with our elected officials, they would support the GERD. They would support economic development. They would support electrification of the Horn of Africa. Now, does the United States leadership, Republican or Democrat, have that wisdom? So far, they haven't shown it, but I'm an optimist, and I would hope that they would learn their lesson and recognize the validity of this election and recognize the validity of the GERD and reverse the policies and support Ethiopia as an ally, which has been a strong ally for a long period of time.
True, true.
That's what I would hope.
Yeah, we also hope the United States of America will play a constructive role in African affairs.
Yes.
And that the relations of Ethiopia and US will improve in the near future.
Yes.
And that all depends on what is taking place in Ethiopia at the same time, and also what the US authorities think of Africa and Ethiopia. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. If you have anything to say, if you have a message for Ethiopians regarding this election and also the things we have talked about, GERD, the floor is yours.
I think we should concentrate. Two things have happened. One is the election, if all signs continue as they have, of a successful, peaceful, fair election. This is a major hurdle for Ethiopia. The filling of the GERD will be another major hurdle. With these two accomplishments, Ethiopia now can become more bolder and aggressive in moving ahead on various policies, domestically and also for all of Africa, which has to include a very serious, contentious discussion of ethnicity. I would hope that Europe and the United States would recognize the positive steps that Ethiopia is taking in the interest of its people and of the continent and support that. That's certainly what I'm going to work for as an American in the United States, and I am proud to be a friend of Ethiopia given what the Ethiopian people have done and accomplished in this election.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you
it's
for
a
the
pleasure
opportunity.
to have you here in our studio in Addis Ababa.
My pleasure, always being at us.
Thank you. Our esteemed viewers, this is all we have for you today. Stay tuned with the rest of Prime Media's programs. Thank you.